This June, we're celebrating Pride Month, presented by Milwaukee Film's Genre Queer program. Join us for 4 weeks of special events and screenings, including returning favorites, stunning restorations, and mind-expanding features. Alongside our incredible lineup of films are some fun and insightful events, including community conversations. Celebrate the past, present, and future of LGBTQIA cinema. Tickets on sale now at mkefilm.org/Pride Month.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Good afternoon to everyone watching live. I'm Aster Gilbert, the Genre Queer programmer at Milwaukee Film, and welcome to Milwaukee Film's 2021 Pride Month programming. Throughout the month of June, Milwaukee Film's Genre Queer program presents Pride Month with 4 weeks of screenings, conversations, and events that celebrate the past, present, and future of LGBTQIA+ cinema and community. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this Pride Month celebration, Freighter and the Medical College of Wisconsin, Kohl's, Advocate Aurora, Manpower Group, and We Energies Foundation. Thank you so much for your support for this program. You can find 12 feature films and a shorts program available all month long through our virtual platform, as well as a slate of virtual events streaming live or available to watch afterward on our YouTube and Facebook pages. To see more details, access films, or find an event schedule, head to mkefilm.org. I'd also like to shout out that this event is our second to last Pride event. Our next one is tomorrow, the Arthur J. Bresson panel at noon, so be sure to tune in and see that. And now we're going to get to our panel, the LGBTQ+ intersectionality, representation, and advocacy in the workplace. I would like to, that's my cat Beef. I would like to hand it over to my good friend Jason Ray of the Wisconsin LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce, who will be moderating today's panel. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Aster. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this, and thanks everyone for joining. Happy Pride. As Aster mentioned, my name is Jason Ray. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I serve as the president and CEO for the Wisconsin LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and we are so thrilled to be, and we're so thrilled to be a partner with Milwaukee Film and all of the great work that they are doing. So a major shout out to them for it. But we're really looking forward to a great discussion today with some fantastic panelists who are about to bring up on stage here. But really looking forward to, if you do have questions during it, pop them in the chat if you're watching on Facebook or things, and we can try to get to some of your questions as well. But really looking forward to this discussion today. So we'll bring up our panelists here. Wonderful. And I'm going to have each of them go around and introduce themselves. And I've got a question for them as they tell us a little bit about themselves. And that first question is, what does pride mean to you? So we're going to go, we'll go alphabetically here. So we'll start with Melanie, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what pride means to you.
Hi, thank you, Jason. I'm Melanie Maddox. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And to me, well, let me say I'm extremely excited to be here and to be part of this important conversation. I am very proud to be part of Manpower Group, one of the sponsors, but also just on my own behalf, very proud to be here. To me, pride is really about confidence and community, and about the celebration and opportunity to take half a step forward, with the comfort and confidence to know that other folks that we're in relationship with will be taking that other step to join us. So definitely a lot to celebrate and reinvigorate for the work ahead.
I love that attitude about celebrating, but to reinvigorate. I think that's a really good way to look at pride. Nate, how would you go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Nate Coe, pronouns he, him, his. And I would say for what pride means to me, I think in the past couple of years, I feel like that's really shifted. I think last year with the pandemic and not being able to get together with our friends and family kind of shifted what that kind of priority of coming together looked like. And I think kind of really showed that we needed to find new ways to connect with our community. And my partner and I, at the time, we started handing out free pride and trans flags in our neighborhood. We put out a sign and just a little canister and let people take flags. And I think now, like, pride is really like connecting into my local community. Before it was so much about kind of getting together at Pride Fest or going to different Pride celebrations. And I think kind of having that celebration of pride in my neighborhood with other LGBTQ individuals, but also allies and just the community. I feel like the 2 years in a row that we've done this, it's just really connected us to people that we never would have had a conversation with before. And that's kind of given me a new meaning for Pride every year now.
I love that, Nate. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for the work you
do. I'm from Coles. I should announce that as well.
No, and Nate, I know that your flags I've seen all over Facebook, and I think it's sprung not only here in Milwaukee, but are taking place in Madison now, I've seen, and other places. So thank you for the work that you've done with that to as you say, bring people together. I think that's a wonderful way to think about Pride. And last but certainly not least, Yoshi.
Hello, everybody. My name is Yoshi Barnes. I am the CEO of Sport My Fitness. I am also a teacher, a coach, and a few other things. And I'm just really here to be a support of what I think old school Pride was, of just love and taking pride in that from a community of people who will support you by any means and will show up for you every single time because they are consistent in love. It's who they are in all their platforms. It's who they are with their friends, their family. And I support all the people who represent that in Pride. So
I love that. I wrote it down, consistent in love. I love that way of thinking about it. So I think, with that, as we, kind of open up, and we're going to make this a free-flowing discussion today. As we think about that feeling of acceptance, of coming together as a community, could each of you tell us maybe a little bit about, a moment of feeling truly represented and included, either in your place of employment, your business, your company, and why you felt that way? I don't know, Nate, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I would say, and I'll kind of connect this to work. I think when I've always been out in the workplace, previous jobs and my current job. And I think to me, it was always, my very first job out of college, it was a conscious decision I remember making as I was starting and saying, as I start my career and people don't know me yet, am I going to be out and am I going to let people see me and see that whole part of me? And I made the decision that I had to, or I wouldn't be able to truly show up and just enjoy bringing, we always say, bring your whole self to work. And I would say kind of that place that I feel I would say I was really first seen was I would say at Kohl's probably about 5 years ago or so, when marriage equality was the topic of discussion and the decision that the Supreme Court was being made, and companies were making the decision if they were going to update their logos on their social pages to the Pride flag. And that was the first time that I was all of a sudden in front of senior leaders, being very vulnerable and kind of being open about who I am and why this was impactful and why it was important for the employer that I worked for to join this conversation. Up until then, it wasn't, again, I wasn't hiding who I was. I didn't have any problem with anybody with being out at work, was very accepted. But that was the first place where that part of me was the focus of the discussion at work. And I feel like that kind of just shifted the trajectory of how I would start to show up at work. And really it was kind of the starting point of the work that I've done in that space over the past 5 years, and kind of the passion that started there. I was kind of ignited in that moment. And I feel like that was kind of the first place that I, as an individual, felt seen for bringing that part of me to the workplace.
That's awesome. And a great opportunity to bring, as you mentioned, your full authentic self to work, and making that conscious decision. And we know that there's still work to do to allow all individuals that opportunity. I think the study from the Human Rights Campaign that came out 2 or 3 years ago now showed, I think it was 46% of LGBTQ workers remain closeted at work, which is a sobering statistic. And the fact that you felt accepted and valued right away for who you are is wonderful. Melanie or Yoshi, would either of you like to jump in and share about a time when you kind of felt truly represented and belonging at work?
Sure. I maybe came out of college and was happily naive about workplaces, maybe not quite as thoughtful as Nate. I'd done some advocacy work in college, so left college on my resume with things that identified me as being active in the community, and I don't even know that that was really a very intentional choice. It was just how it was. And so the first place of employment, although in corporate America, where I ended up, was very inclusive. And I don't know that I really appreciated how much that was true until later in life when I worked in other large organizations that and I won't name them, but that talked about inclusivity, but really it was more a begrudging tolerance than really the kind of bring your whole self to work that that I think we all want for ourselves and our families and our colleagues as well. So maybe that's a little bit more of a negative spin on it, Jason, but having seen both sides and having lived and worked in a lot of parts of the world, including places where it is not only unfriendly but illegal to be queer, I really appreciate, and there are many employers, large and small, in Milwaukee where you can be seen, be heard, be valued, and the work that you do is just better when you know that.
I think I have a slight, I have a different response because I am an entrepreneur and I get to create my atmosphere. So I get to feel as comfortable as I would like because I get to invite those people who are just as comfortable with themselves or have any other issues with themselves, or love however they love themselves, like they're welcome in that space. And so it's just made it for it's just diverse. A lot of people that come through my gym. So I own a gym. It's called Sport My Fitness. It is a private gym. I can fit up to about 20 people. It's a capacity, but it's a lot of one-on-one, some semi-private sessions. I think I've been accepted by just always sharing of myself. I'm an extremely open person. So then the word of mouth is that, and then I attracted that. So that calls for a great environment to be myself and to get help, counsel, to vent if I needed to, and also help other people in that space as well. But I do contract with schools and high schools, and that's a little different because that's not my work environment. Those are kids that I feel like to be gentle with sometimes. And if they asked, absolutely. If a teacher asked, sure. But it wasn't something I would parade to children just because I wanted to be gentle with them. But I also extremely open with them. So if they had a comfort or a space that they wanted to talk about them being away or they were confused, I am the opportunity for them to be comfortable, to vent to, and to just be an ear for them. So it's positive all around for me as best as I can.
I love that. And I love how you talked about getting to create that space there and that welcoming environment, because you get to bring in people and you get to live your full truth, which is fantastic. And as you think of that as an entrepreneur, what are some lessons that you've learned through doing that other entrepreneurs who may be watching right now can learn from that?
I think it starts with self, actually. Like when I started to walk in that pride, when I started to walk in loving me fully and wholly, it actually helps me free other people and liberate them to be themselves. So, and that's how it works. It works with self and loving you. And then once that happens, it'll flow out in your business. It'll flow out in the relationships with your customers and your clients. And then again, like you want to seek out, usually people have careers in their purpose too. So your purpose has a tendency to lead you to all of the right people and all the right places to help you start the journey or the type of life that you want to live with the type of people in it as well.
That's awesome. The idea of self and flowing out. And I think we see it when we think about the LGBTQ community, when we think about representation and we think about advocacy in the workplace and all tied together. It's often those small businesses, those entrepreneurs who've been leading the way, being their full self, that has allowed corporations and others to follow suit because they're seeing people. And I think, and as we think of that, Nate and Melanie, you both work in corporate America. How's corporate America been leading? Are you thinking it's leading in advocacy for inclusion in the workplace? Are they they following the small business community, or is there more to go? I know it's a big, broad question there, but I'll let either of you jump in if you want to try to tackle that one.
That is a big one. I'll say that I think, of course, it takes both, right? To, culture is evolving, and, treading water is not a good solution for anyone. So large companies have a ton to learn from smaller organizations that can incubate better ways of being. But I think that we also have a role to play because we have reach that is a national footprint or an international footprint. And while every community is different, equality should be a value in every community, and inclusion should be a value in every community. And so I think one of the roles that larger companies can play is by being in so many places and consistently leading and demonstrating that there is a lot of business value to be had from treating employees fairly, equally, and in a way that lets them contribute as much as they can.
Yeah, I would say, like Kohl's being a large corporation, I think, it's the company is on its journey, but individuals are on their own journey as well. And I think it depends on who you're engaged with and who you're connecting with, what those teams are, what their experience has been, how much of the people that you're working with is that representation in the teams that you're working with, or do you have those allies and advocates in those positions as well? I think that's a huge piece of it. And I think when you think about a large organization, I know one of the things that our executive sponsor of our BRG has said to me many times is, she's like, one of the things, while we're big and sometimes change can be slow, when we really put our mind to something, or when we put the efforts there, the impact can be huge. And there's also a big opportunity for change to really happen when those efforts come to life. And I think that that's something that has stuck with me, because you work at a big organization, things can take time and you have to bring the right players around. But when you really get going, like that power and that kind of inspiration that can be driven from that work, it can truly, it impacts employees, it impacts the communities, it impacts customers. And so it can really make a huge difference when you get everything kind of pointed in the right direction.
So Nate, to build off that, is there a specific example you can think of where it took the work, but you saw it kind of pay off from your experiences?
Yeah, one of the things, the T-shirt I'm wearing today, like this, it says "Love Wins" on it, and this is a T-shirt that Kohl's is selling in our Pride collection this year. When we kind of started down this path, when our business resource group first got going 5 years ago, we were tackling things like, how do we set up coffee chats, and how can we expense the donuts, and like, how can we do some of these smaller things? And we were like, you know what, maybe in like 2 years we'll start talking about product and like how we can bring people into that conversation. And it was a conversation we started. At first it was like, okay, who are the people we can talk to in product development? Who are the people we need to be talking to on the merchant side? Who are the people we should talk to in marketing, so that when this gets created, we're talking about it and it's showing up. And that first year, like, we had a handful of T-shirts, and that was our option. And it was very meaningful because it was connected to the work and connected to the community. And since that's grown, you go to Kohls.com and search Pride today, like there's a whole experience on there. It highlights one of our LGBTQ designers on our Diversity Design Council. Their pronouns are displayed right there on Kohls.com. So there's really this embracing of showing up in a meaningful way. And I think while it took time, I think the time it took was to do it right, and making sure that we were showing up in the right way, and not trying to move too fast and getting it wrong, but also moving, knowing we might get a few things wrong that we need to adjust, so not letting that hold us back. I think that's been kind of one of the things that I've really seen kind of, I don't even remember what your original question, what it was, but that's one of those things that I've really kind of seen that impact happen over the couple years, and really in a relatively short amount of time. You all have had such great success so quickly there, but you're right, it takes time, and it's a building opportunity. And I checked out the Kohl's Pride Shop and was just so impressed to see how it's grown. But I think it's because companies understand the value of creating that inclusive experience, not just internally, but externally, and to be real champions
for inclusion that way. So thank you for sharing. I don't know, Melanie, if you've seen examples kind of in the corporate side that kind of stand out to you.
Yeah, so I would say that more and more of our conversations with clients, our whole job at Manpower is to put people to work. So it stands to reason we do have a lot of associates and staff, but that also means we have a lot of clients. And so we're able to have more and more conversations with them about what diversity and inclusion means. And those are really rewarding conversations. So you have both a kind of, very large scale, large corporate entity to another large corporate entity interaction happening, but then you also have individual candidates walking into a branch and making sure that that's an inclusive experience, so that if someone doesn't want to check male or female on a form, they're not forced to do that when they're thinking about applying for a job. So I feel like it's one of the leverage points of larger organizations is that there is so much such a gradient between large scale influencing policy as a large employer and kind of on the ground step by step. Another advantage of being a larger corporation is there are just more people, and that means that you have more queer people, and that can create that sense of community, and it can also be another source of passion and energy to get things changed, that depending on your mix of folks could be a little bit tougher in a smaller organization. It was actually an employee, and it must have been more than 6 years ago, but we're really proud to be an employer of choice for the 6th year in a row in the HRC Corporate Equality Index. And that whole effort was one employee saying, "Hey, why aren't we doing this work? Why aren't we completing this?" And a lot more folks coming to the table and saying, "You know what? I don't know. Why aren't we doing that? Let's get together and get it done."
That's awesome. It just takes one person to help spark that change.
Absolutely.
So thinking of that change, and we've shared some success stories here. I want to kind of flip it a little bit and say to all three of you, are there either structural or operational improvements or things that are missing? What's the next step here as we develop representation, as we develop inclusive workplaces? What's the next thing that we're missing out on, or what aren't businesses, whether they're small businesses or corporations, what aren't they doing now that they need to be doing, or what's on the horizon there?
I like to open that one up to, I guess, providing more mental health training, or I would say coaching or teachers or some type of counselor or psychologist that is linked to the workplace. Because although the work environment might be accepting them, people still show up to work with mental issues that they are not sharing and not talking to people about. So it would be nice to have a person that would be at work or in your environment that you could feel safe with saying, talking about a procedure you just had, or a sexual experience you just had that was appropriate or not. You want to have the space to do that. And if you don't have friends to do it, that you work for a large corporation that could provide that type of resource. So I think that would be a stepping stone.
I love that. Others, Nate or Melanie, are there other things? What else needs to be done?
Well, I think one of the things, I don't want to sound like Pollyanna, but one of the positive aspects of everyone being forced remote is that we're seeing, I think, more and more engagement, and it was a momentum already building of folks that aren't at headquarters being involved in our BRG, and of course being involved in their own local communities, but bringing that knowledge to bear to make the whole organization better and stronger. And because of folks being forced remote, we're on video so much more than we were, and it's not a substitute for face-to-face, but it is better than just being a voice on the end of the line. And I think the next challenge is figuring out how to maintain that and grow that and improve that, because we have all reached Zoom fatigue. And so how do we keep the best parts of that and keep more and more engagement and keep inviting people into the space, whether it's a virtual space or a physical space, to be part of the conversation about what to do next?
I think that's a really good point, especially as we work at the chamber with a number of our business resource groups, and a question pre-pandemic was, how do you engage folks who aren't necessarily in that corporate office or aren't right there? And in this pandemic age, they've been able to. But now it's, as folks start going back into the office, how do you keep that momentum going? How do you keep building on that? Because we know that workplaces and business resource groups drive people in. It drives engagement. It drives connectivity to folks. And that is a great challenge that folks are going to have as we continue moving forward. Nate, is there anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was talking before, and then I think I lost like complete connection on my side. So I don't know if, hopefully you can hear me now.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say, I think that, and I was starting to say, what I think I'm starting to see happen, and hopefully starts to happen more, is just a level of accountability across the organization and for all individuals. Just for all diversity and inclusion practices, and just kind of keeping that in mind in all the work that you're doing, even the emails that you're sending, or the programs that you're building, or how we're showing up to our community. I think having that accountability across all levels of the organization and kind of holding yourself accountable day in and day out, not just for LGBTQ, but like for the Black community, for the Hispanic community, for women, for people with disabilities, like all of the different communities, and keeping that in mind in the work we're doing. I think just you have to think about it. Like, it's not something that just naturally happens in all instances, unfortunately. And so I think that holding yourself accountable is a big piece that I think we're starting to see happen more and more, and I just hope that continues.
That's a really, really great point about that accountability. And as folks think about it, what resources have you all either been a part of, or have you come across that has been successful in facilitating some of this diversity, equity, and inclusion work, either in your business, in your corporation, in your personal experiences that you've come across, that has helped either give you new insights, has helped you grow, or it's helped hold you accountable to things? Are there any resources or ways that you think others could find?
Well, one thing that we did for the first time this year for Pride, which I promise I'll get to something more serious in a minute, Jason, but we had a virtual craft hour for Pride, and it was so fun. And the number of folks that joined and said, this is the first time I've ever been at any BRG event, it was hilarious and a lot of fun. So that's definitely something that we'll be doing. I think trying to find that mix of serious advocacy work and public policy work and making fundamental change, but also regenerating the energy so that we have the energy for the fight that needs to happen, or for the effort that needs to take place. So I think we've all learned to make sure, even remotely, that we're having some fun while we're doing it. Maybe not in the same meeting, but having some fun while we're doing it. We're also thinking about internal expert resources differently. We're lining up, for example, most organizations, most large organizations have a legal team. Well, what is the legal team saying about some of the legislation that's coming through? And there's been a lot of change of administration since January, a very different focus. So we're having our head of legal have a conversation with BRG members about what this means. The last time we saw marriage equality change happening on a large scale, how did that trickle into corporate life? How could we expect to see that with our clients? How can we expect as employees to see that impact our daily lives? So there are a lot of internal resources as well, and of course, partner organizations. It's been interesting as we celebrated Transgender Day of Remembrance and Day of Awareness, to bring in outside views that are completely, folks that spend all of their time thinking about these issues, educating themselves and educating others, and to bring them into our corporate environment with a very different perspective has been some of the most rewarding work. But we also do have access to folks with perspectives that, are a professional perspective, but who are willing to take a look at it and be part of a conversation, a two-way conversation, not a broadcast, about what that's going to mean for us.
Wait, I have a follow-up question. What was the craft that you guys made?
Well, we didn't all make the same craft. I don't have mine sitting at my desk. We the first 50 folks that signed up, we sent them craft supplies to their homes from Amazon, and then you made whatever craft you wanted, and then we compared. We had amazing crafts. We had a kind of home pride parade, and you send in videos and pictures, since we couldn't celebrate Pride as a group. So I just made a little sandwich board for my toddler, but people made diorama floats of what the float they would like to see at Pride, and used pipe cleaners to make elaborate rings. And I mean, it was, some of us were outclassed, but we still had fun.
Sounds impressive.
We have to have fun doing this. You have to find, it's serious work we're doing, but we have to find ways to recharge and have fun and build those communities together that way, because there's much more work to do. Nate or Yoshi, are there other resources that you have come across? I know, Melanie touched on some of the, internal things, and then some external experts. Are there other resources that either of you have used that have helped you facilitate some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Again, I think the entrepreneur that will still speak out to me is having events. I also host events, but being able to provide anyone with a platform to utilize my space to be able to do that. So I've had people lease or rent the space, and that is just for them to just be them, or to have a space to say, I want to do this. I don't care if you want to ballet, tap, swirl, it doesn't matter to me. If you want to lift weights, if whatever that is, it's a personal development space. I think that's why I'm all over with that, is because my program is designed to help all type of people in that personal development, and whatever that looks like for a person. You provide them with that, or even relationships, or connecting them with other people that's like them. And when you go to Pride, and when you're in that community, you're going to run into people that they can relate to, and you just connect them that way.
I love that you are the resource there yourself, as people are looking for it, to allow people to be there. And I think that's one of the things I love seeing about entrepreneurs, is how they are there for others, and to open up that space and to allow that to happen. Nate,
no, sorry. I also then will have business owners, right? So then I have business owners. I have people who've had phobias, and I get all those type of clients, moms, dads, I get them too. So it's a conversation with me at some point too, that I'm able to connect them even to a whole different community, to give them some type of understanding, or give them a different perspective. So it's not just in our community, or if you were gay, straight, or whatever you were, and then I had to then communicate with a bunch of heterosexuals and have to hear that, and then looking at me like, well, you don't look away. And so I have to hear their opinions, and but also be a person. When you're in my space, you have to be able to allow me to correct you, or redirect you, I should say. So I try to win in both spaces.
I love that, to redirect them. I think that's key. Nate, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that one of the positive things that's come out of this kind of virtual working environment is that there's been so many more virtual conferences and just virtual conversations, much like the one we're having right now, that have popped up throughout the year, or the past 18 months. And I feel like being able to jump into conversations or listen to people speak that before you wouldn't have necessarily had access to, or it would have meant getting a ticket to an event and your company flying you somewhere and putting you up in a hotel. Now all of a sudden I can make a decision that, Thursday afternoon, I had one panel this afternoon that I listened in on transgender equality in the workplace. And so I think that, again, a conversation that if I had to be in person, or companies hadn't gotten used to doing kind of the virtual thing, was maybe a conversation that wouldn't have taken place, and it wouldn't have reached as many people. So it's not necessarily one resource, but I've been finding, I actually learned a lot about those through Instagram, like the different accounts I follow and the different people I follow. I see a lot posted there. Out and Equal shares a lot of opportunities across their network. LinkedIn is also a really great place for virtual learning. So that's been a place too that we've tapped into for individual learning opportunities for the organization, but also for groups. So definitely a lot of those virtual learning places now.
Can I add one more thought? I feel like it should be said that little things matter. And earlier this year in January, our organization took a much more active look at, do people have pronouns, for example, in their email signatures? Is there a way, how on Teams we use Teams? Can you add your pronouns? And that small thing can have a huge effect when we're talking to candidates, because we're hiring, when we're talking to clients. A lot of conversations start because of these little things. And I think, it can, at a large or small company, it can feel like, no, I need to focus on the big things. But there are small things that have huge impact and that actually help you propel forward so that you can get those big things done.
That is absolutely crucial, because it is those little things are also the signal to others around how inclusive you are. It shows the intent. And I often work with companies at the chamber who will come and say, well, we need to do everything. And I'm like, well, let's just start with a couple things, and that goes a long way. And as we're building both workplaces for employees to come, but in Yoshi's cases, you're building businesses where you want people to feel accepted, and you want clients and customers and things. It's everything from the pronouns in the email signature to the rainbow decal you might put on your door to a statement you put out on your Facebook page for Pride Month or whatever it may be. It's those symbols that matter. Symbols and small actions do matter. And over time, as we've heard from all three of you today, those small actions build up to bigger opportunities. So as we think about, this event was titled, LGBT intersectionality, representation, and advocacy in the workplace. So we've touched on a few of those areas, but I want to ask, on the intersectionality piece, which is, I think really important right now, as we as a community are a diverse community. How has the intersectionality of for any of you to answer, how has the intersectionality of your identities really influenced your experiences in the workplace?
I mean, I can speak to that. We actually just had a panel discussion at work this week. It was co-hosted by the Hispanic Professionals BRG and the Pride BRG, and it was around the topic of gender in language. And the Pride BRG kind of spoke on kind of why pronouns matter. We went through definitions because there was a lot of education that we were with the audience that we had. And then the Hispanic Professionals BRG, and again, the woman that spoke, like, she is from Mexico, been in the US for I think 3 years now. Spanish is her first language, and she's a lesbian and out and a member of our BRG. And she spoke on kind of how gendering of like the Spanish language, like how that comes into play in the day-to-day on how you address a group of friends, and if it's like takes on kind of like what gender you assign when you're talking about a group of people. And so it was just a really great conversation, because again, like, is that intersectional nature of individuals, and not everybody there spoke Spanish or was Hispanic. Not everybody there was LGBTQ, but it was a great place where, yes, there was intersectionality and overlap, but it also brought us together and had a conversation that maybe we wouldn't have been considering without really focusing on that commonality and that intersectionality and how these things impact one another. And it was just, again, like, we didn't know kind of what to expect from everybody else that joined that conversation. And people were really, really engaged in that and had questions and were jumping in and sharing their experiences. So it ended up being really powerful. And again, I think it's just that those points of connection that just remind you of how, like, we're all human and how connected we really are. It's moments like that it just kind of really, like, brings that to the surface.
I think that's really important, as we see, and we see it with BRGs all the time. And for those not familiar, BRGs, business resource groups, if you're watching and aren't familiar, those conversations, and we hear it from companies when they bring different groups together and really are intentional about it. I know a number of LGBT groups this month focused on Juneteenth and partnered with their African American BRGs to really say, and highlight the significance of Juneteenth as an example. This isn't just Pride Month, but realizing that we have different identities that we bring to the workplace with us, and how we can recognize and lift up those voices but not only lift up those voices, but continue to provide that safe space for everyone to get to be their true, authentic self at work, which is so important. And as we think about that, is the second part of the title is representation. I'd be curious to hear from any of you. How does diversity of leadership, either of a company or in ownership of a small business, how does that impact the community? How does having diverse voices in leadership impact decisions that are being made, impact how people feel about a company? What does that representation piece really mean?
I would say being in schools has been the biggest turn for me because kids are struggling so bad. And that is, for me, is where I would prefer the main focus to be, is because when you mature, you grow into yourself and you kind of start to have a different understanding, and they're not there. And then they're introduced or in their feeling ways, and they are experiencing things. And so to be, I guess, a resource within schools to be able to help with those type of situations. And I've just experienced it in so many schools, private and all, and MPS, of meeting kids that are struggling with their identity, with their sexuality, and it's intense. And if they have a family that's not accepting them, a lot of suicide conversations are coming up. And I think to save their lives is the most important. And I think because those are going to be the people that eventually will be having these panel conversations. And those are going to be our bosses. And they need to be around long enough, strong enough to be able to help other people that'll come along the way that'll be just like them. And that is extremely important in a whole entire school system that I don't think provides that as just a highlighted resource. You have a student counselor and that's it. But there can be now, I guess, jobs and opportunities now for LGBT people who just want to go into that as a field, as an opportunity to be now a counselor, a school counselor, a therapist of some sort, a coach even if other teachers can now start taking courses in how to use proper language with communicating with children or accepting them or coming off away and not scaring them away, but giving them a place to communicate. That to me would be something that would be awesome to see an improvement in.
I love that. I love that idea of why representation matters, because it is about that next generation there, and people want to see it. I know we do a program with the Chamber, our Emerging Leaders program, to connect LGBTQ plus college students with small business owners, corporate professionals, because they question and say, can I be my authentic self out there? And they need to see it. They need to see those voices so that we can continue to build that inclusive community. Nate or Melanie, do either of you have thoughts on kind of the representation in leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big piece of we talk about representation, and I think there's a lot of diversity in thought that you can discuss as well. And I think having that representation and those viewpoints in the conversations when big decisions are getting made or large conversations are being had, that representation in that room really matters in those moments. And I think that, to me, I think that's a big piece of, especially in the workplace, where that representation can really come in, and that directly has an impact on the rest of your employees, how, again, you're showing up to your customer, how you're showing up to your community, and having that diversity of thought, I think, is just a really key piece of that representation.
That's great. Thank you. So we touched on the intersectionality portion a little bit. We could go deeper into that. We've touched on the representation piece. I'm going to, as we come near the end of this panel discussion, I want to look at the advocacy piece then and pose a question of what role do businesses, large or small, have in being advocates for inclusion? What should companies and businesses do to be full advocates for the LGBTQ community?
I mean, I can kind of start there, and I think one of the things we talk about at Kohl's, I mean, our overall mission is to inspire and empower families to lead fulfilled lives, and I think that sounds very big. Like, that is a big statement to make. But when we talk about like empowering families, I think one of the things we talk about is that's all families. And that's all that looks different. That makeup is different across the entire country. So when we think about kind of the role that we play in people's lives where they're shopping and like, I mean, yeah, where you go to buy clothes or you go to buy home stuff, that's who we are at the end of the day. But like, that's a big piece of kind of like connecting all of those dots is kind of how Kohl's is showing up in those ways and like showing up for those families. And I think I've talked about this a little bit in some other spaces around the first year we had Pride merch, and it's been always connected to a contribution to the Trevor Project. And within our marketing, Trevor Project it shows up, and in the store the first year there was a big sign with a same-sex couple, and it talked about the Trevor Project and the work that they're doing. And the thing that I always think about with that is like you think of a kid or like a family that's walking into a Kohl's store, maybe in a more like isolated area or maybe in a more kind of socially conservative area. That might be some of the only representation they might be seeing as they're growing up, and to see that reflected from a major business saying, oh, we see you, we hear you, and we're standing with you. I mean, I think that's really where you're kind of really paying it forward to those families, and we owe it to our customers and owe it to the people that work at Kohl's to show up for those families. So that's kind of a high lofty answer, but I think it comes right down to like really the mission of our organization, and then everything else should flow through that.
I love that. That's so powerful. Yeah, because what we see is what we think of as, you know, part of how things are. So when we don't see representation from different kinds of families, especially kids, don't don't normalize the love that makes the family and the relationship instead of, you know, less important things. As I heard you ask that question, Jason, I'm thinking about, you know, situations that have come up at work related to LGBTQ, of course, staff or clients, but also associates that we send to work sites that we don't control. And one of the ways that we influence change at clients, large and small, is that we certainly have situations where a client will have said quietly to someone in the local branch, here's the kind of person we're really looking for. And so, you know, that makes it our job every day at every level of the organization to sometimes say, you know what, that's not how we decide if someone's able to do that job. That's not, you know, that doesn't describe someone's capability to do the job. And that could be across a whole number of parameters. But certainly we also have situations where, you know, a client calls and says, you know, this associate is in transition and they went into X, Y, and Z restroom, and now people are uncomfortable. And so how we respond when that happens, and the support that is deployed within our organization to make sure that the person who gets the call from the client, who may not really, you know, have been through this before, it's, you know, these things that don't happen often, to make sure that we deploy all of that knowledge and experience to support them in having the right conversation about how we respect and value associates, even if they're in a work site that we don't control, what we consider to be, you know, an acceptable standard of conduct for folks that we work with. That's really crucial. And I think one of the hardest things is these unusual situations. It's a lot easier to train for something that could come up often, or to train generally around how do you respond to a microaggression in a way that's productive and moves you forward. It's a lot harder with complex situations that are rare. And that's where I think, you know, the great communication and the constant awareness of what the values, and I love the way, Nate, you talk about the values at Kohl's, you know, knowing those values is what helps someone remember, hey, this is a weird thing I've never dealt with before. I don't need to deal with it alone. Whatever the situation is, you know, I know it's maybe not consistent with our values, so that tells me I need to reach out for some help.
Yoshi, do you have thoughts on how small businesses can continue to be advocates for the LGBTQ community?
I'm going to go with what Nate said. It should be your business mission, a part of the mission, a part of the vision of your organization, and that trickles down to hopefully your employees and other people alike. and knowing how we're in a time where people are not feeling accepted in certain spaces, to make sure that they are inclusive, and knowing that when they are hired, or if it's a conversation that needs to be made, during that hiring even process or interviewing process. That is a way too to let them know that you are welcome here. That is a conversation to be had. And I think in a lot of small businesses, when you're thinking of how you want to delegate things and how you see it in fruition, if you want everybody to use your iPhone, or Apple, or do you just want some people to use it? And I think Apple, I'm trying to get everybody to use it. So that's their mission. And I think if you have an organization, it's like everybody can get it. I don't care who you are. That comes from within the foundation of a business or a company organization.
I love that perspective. I know we're coming up near the top of the hour here, and I want to pose one final question to all three of you. I think as we look at Pride, it is a time to celebrate, but it's also a time to think about what's next. What advice do you have for potentially allies who are watching this right now? What does allyship look like, or what can individuals out there do to be better allies, better advocates, better champions for diversity, equity, and inclusion work? Is there something you would want allies to do or to know?
I'll say for some other person, it's always good to find people who have a voice. Because there's people out here who don't. They might be thinking a bunch of stuff, but they're not saying it. So you might have great ideas for your business, and you don't have the right person the spokesperson. And that can be a resource or a connective, source of where you can reach out to someone that can speak on your behalf and represent you and what you're standing for, because you're just not that person that wants to be seen. You want to be in the front of things, but there are people out here that you can connect with that can be that for you.
Yeah, I would say from an allyship standpoint, I think sometimes you think of allyship and you think of the person that's at the front of the march and doing all of the big things, calling their senators, doing all of the big things. Allyship can be as much as updating your pronouns in your email signature to when you're sending an email to someone that they see that and they're okay, this is a safe space. I can share my pronouns. I think there are a lot of small things that people can do that indicate allyship, but I think then also where you have the power to make change, it might be within your family. You have someone that says something and you can say, hey, that wasn't right. Or actually, have you thought about it this way? And you can have those conversations in small ways too, and make impact and make change without having to be kind of at the front line. So I feel sometimes I think allyship can seem intimidating because you feel you might not know enough about a community to be supportive. But I feel doing the homework and educate yourself. Because again, there are a lot of people out there that need allyship right now, not just the LGBTQ community. And I think that it's just something that everyone has an opportunity to be an ally to somebody else.
I agree. And I would add, start somewhere, which I think is, part of what Nate is saying, and expect to not always get it right. If allyship is new to you, you might say something wrong. And hopefully, if you do that, someone will gently say, hey, this would be better. Be prepared for that. Be open to that. We're all on some kind of allyship journey in some spectrum of our lives. So just knowing that could happen and that's not a message that you should stop being an ally. It's just an invitation to continue and grow.
I love that, Melanie. That's a perfect way to conclude. I've done a number of presentations this month on LGBT inclusion in the workplace, and every one of them ends with talking about it's a journey, that allyship is a journey, that we are all on this together. And this is not the end of the conversation, but the beginning of the conversation. I know we are out of time. Melanie, Nate, Yoshi, thank you so much for your thoughtfulness. Thank you so much for being a part of a really engaging, moving conversation that I know I've left here with a page of notes of things I want to do or things that I need to think about as well. But your voices today have been so instrumental as we continue to celebrate Pride Month, but to think about the important role that businesses, both large and small, have in helping lead when it comes to intersectionality, when it comes to representation, and when it comes to advocacy, and creating that space where all individuals are able to bring their full, authentic self to work, where people are able to create that welcoming and inclusive community, which I think is what part of Pride is. It's about celebration, but it's about how do we continue to move forward collectively together to create the change that we need to make the world that we all want to live in. So Melanie, Nate, Yoshi, thank you again so much. Thanks to Milwaukee Film for helping put this panel together, and happy Pride, everyone.
Hey, thank you. Happy Pride.
Thank you, Jason.
This June, we're celebrating Pride Month, presented by Milwaukee Film's Genre Queer program. Join us for 4 weeks of special events and screenings, including returning favorites, stunning restorations, and mind-expanding features. Alongside our incredible lineup of films are some fun and insightful events, including community conversations. Celebrate the past, present, and future of LGBTQIA cinema. Tickets on sale now at mkefilm.org/Pride Month.